Joining me now to discuss this and a few other of the big stories of the day, Chairman of the Bow Group, Ben Harris Quinney, is with us. Afternoon to you, Ben.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Always good to have you with us. Let's pick up on that point. Young people are feeling more economically insecure, ignored and apathetic than the average voter before the election, amid evidence that they could be fueling the growth of smaller parties. Have a look at this.
Yes, I want to see 16 and 17-year-olds voting. They can go out and work. They can serve in our armed forces. And of course, if they are out and working, they pay tax. And therefore, they should have a say over how the money they're paying in is being used. So yes, I want to see that vote for 16 and 17-year-olds. If you can work, if you can pay tax, if you can serve in your armed forces, then you ought to be able to vote.
So you ought to be able to vote. Ben, there's always been this argument about, do you give 16-year-olds the vote? There's that point. But then there's the other group of people, of course, who are simply refusing to vote.
Yeah, look, I certainly don't think it's just young people who feel entirely disillusioned with British politics, not just now, but for quite a long time. And certainly a very large proportion of those 2019 voters that gave the Conservative Party a big majority last time are returning to none of the above. These are the sort of voters that turned out for the Brexit vote and delivered that very surprising result, but other than that, had pretty much switched off British politics. So there is that widespread disillusionment. With younger people, I think it's fairly cynical from Starmer. He knows that young people are more likely to vote left, so he's probably playing a bit of psephology in that department. The old adage, of course, I think it was Winston Churchill that said, if you're not left wing at the age of 20, you have no heart, and if you're not right wing at the age of 30, you have no head.
Yes.
So always got to take the youth vote with a pinch of salt. I think the biggest party of their support at the moment is the Green Party. I think that has the largest slice of the under-24 vote. Will that be the case in 10 years' time for that voting demographic? I somehow doubt it.
Yeah, and in terms of those that are either undecided, particularly those that are undecided, there's those that simply won't vote, and you always meet people from time to time who have never voted, doesn't change anything. There is that belief out there. It's a democracy, that's fine. I don't get it, but that's fine. But those that are kind of wavering, we are going to talk polling a little later in the programme, but do you think Sunak is relying on that group, if he can rely on anything at all, to think, well, maybe that, if there's 25% of undecideds, I can really limit the damage here?
Well, his polls are so bad that all he can talk about is people that aren't showing up on the polls, I guess, and that are undecided. I think it would be churlish to assume that they're going to improve the fortunes of the Conservative Party currently by any great margin. But there will be, again, a lot of people that are looking at the situation, looking at the options before them, and they're not saying, I'm not going to vote a pox on all your houses, but they're saying, I'm not finding this very inspiring. And I've watched all of the debates so far. I'm sure most people haven't, but I've trawled through them, and you do generally get the impression that there has been a decline in caliber of the sort of people that are putting themselves forward to lead a country like Britain. So you can completely understand why people are undecided. I don't think there is a great difference, in fact, in policy terms between the two major parties, and that's perhaps why you're seeing this breakdown. We are perhaps seeing the beginnings of a breakdown of the two-party system. I think that's a positive thing. But of course, under first past the post, which is a political system I strongly disagree with, but it's very unlikely that the votes for those smaller parties are going to be reflected in representation in Parliament. For that, we would need a proportional representation system similar to that they have on the continent in many countries.
Indeed, and until we have that, we're always going to be in this two-party system, and probably for the next 50 years at least, which is, the more you think about it, there was, of course, a referendum in 2011, wasn't there, about alternative voting. Not much of an interest. In fact, most people seem to have forgotten we had that. I wonder if we had one of those today, Ben, bearing in mind I don't know if we're more politically engaged, but certainly people are more politically animated, for the good or the bad sometimes. Do you think that will be a different sense today, if such a referendum were to take place, would you like PR or AV?
Yeah, I would like PR. I mean, PR is different to AV, which is what was proposed, as you say, under the coalition. And that was because that was a condition of the Liberal Democrats entering into the coalition government. So I don't think AV is the best system. But the Reform Party is called the Reform Party because they want to reform Britain to make it more democratic, to make the change that we are now free to make post-Brexit.
Yeah.
And beyond the Reform Party, I think there are lots of people of all political stripes that recognise that there's an awful lot of people who think differently to the two main parties that are just really completely unrepresented in Parliament. And the argument is often made, but it means that you can't form a strong government if you have PR. I think if you look at the governments of the last decade or so, you would conclude that that would be certainly no change. And it works for other countries in Europe. There are, of course, problems with it, but I think we need to have that reflection of public will in Parliament, and that will re-engage a lot of people with the democratic process.
As we speak, Ben, Reform, of course, are launching their manifesto in Merthyr Tydfil. They are obviously attempting to seal their position of being, certainly in a couple of significant polls, ahead of the Conservatives. Mr Farage is on his feet right now. For those watching us online, they'll be able to see images of that. But we're going to bring you a digest of what was said and any specific moments from that. Let's move, though, to the Labour Party. Of course, the big accusation, the bit the Tories are really trying to make stick, is that actually the Labour Party are going to raise taxes. That seems to be almost the MO at the moment of the Tories. Just keep relentlessly talking about them raising taxes. We know that Wes Streeting says the manifesto is just the start of spending, but won't rule out council tax hikes. That came up today. And earlier this morning, the Shadow Paymaster General, Jonathan Ashworth, was out talking taxes as well. Have a listen.
Let me be absolutely clear with your viewers, because I know people want politicians to be clear. No increase in income tax, no increase in national insurance, no increase in VAT or corporation tax.
Council tax?
We're not doing council tax rebanding. That's Rachel Reeves has ruled.
No increase in council tax.
We're not doing council tax rebanding. Rachel Reeves has ruled that out in the Financial Times today. Every single one of our policies is fully costed and doesn't require additional taxation.
Do you know what, Ben? I loathe those kind of ripostes from politicians. Because what do you do with that? I mean, look, he's never... I mean, in a way, maybe us in the media are slightly to blame, because Kay knows when she asked that question, he's never going to answer it. And in fairness, he probably can't answer it. It's not within his gift. He's not in the government yet. But what you end up with is a situation where he sounds like he's lying, even though... arguably he probably just doesn't know, and it just sounds all shades of awful. Does that work in favour of the Tories? Does it make a difference to Labour? What do you make of it?
Well, I think what should concern people particularly, and this is both Tories and Labour, is they've talked in terms of we won't raise taxes on working people. I think what really gets people's backs up is the weasel words, the trickery. What does that mean? Why aren't you just saying we won't raise taxes? Why are you using the prefix working people? And it's because they've isolated some taxes they won't raise, and they've left off a lot of taxes that one therefore assumes they will be raising. Yeah. And if you look at the spending plans as a whole of many of the parties, but certainly the Tories and Labour, they don't really stack up, because there's a lot of major issues facing the country with the NHS, with care, with energy infrastructure, with just transport infrastructure, the roads, where it's quite clear that a lot more money is going to need to be invested if the country's going to continue to run, and that isn't included in those spending pledges. If we look back to 2019 and 2017, the Tories pledged they were going to cut taxes, they were going to reduce spending, and of course they did the absolute opposite of that. So I would have no confidence that either the Tories or Labour won't be raising taxes. The question basically is how much and what areas. And I think if you look at the phrase working people, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, what does that mean? I mean, the Hinduja brothers are working people, right?
Right. I mean, I don't know how many working people don't pay council tax. But I'm guessing almost all do.
Yeah.
So who are we talking about if we're not talking about working people? We're talking about maybe retirees, the unemployed. I can't see them raising taxes on the unemployed. So the target's going to fall on perhaps retirees, perhaps those that have wealth, but also on working people, but just not on their income tax.
Yeah.
So on fuel tax, on council tax, and all those other taxes. And I think the country as a whole, unsurprisingly, because we have the highest tax burden in living memory, wants taxes to fall in all areas rather than rise. And neither party is really presenting a coherent case that they're going to do that or how they're going to do that.
And that classic Ashworth answer there, we're not going to change the council tax bands. Well, she didn't ask you that. That's a whole different question as to whether you're going to raise council tax. And of course, he never did. And I think he was challenged throughout a couple of other interviews as well this morning on that same point, and he had the same answer or same non-answer, as it were. Ben, stay with us. Ben Harris-Quinney, chairman of the Bow Group, is with us on the programme.